Works if you work it. Works if you work it. Oh, if you work it.
I'm Daniel Silvermintz. I'm a professor at the University of Houston Clear Lake, where I've been teaching classes in philosophy and humanities for the last 20 years. My scholarly interest is in ancient philosophy, which is a subdiscipline within classical studies. And our question is, why classical studies in the 21st century? And perhaps even more complicated, why ancient philosophy in the 21st century? Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom, and the ancient Greeks are credited as the first philosophers, the first ones to provide a rational account for the natural world. They replaced the supernatural explanations for phenomena with rational accounts and provided the first scientific explanation. So thus we could really take as a synonym for philosophy science. And so that leaves us with a very puzzling question. Why ancient science in the 21st century, when we are in our own day experiencing perhaps the greatest scientific revolution that humanity has ever experienced? In our own day, in these last couple of years, we've experienced a world of artificial intelligence where the machines not only have an ability to recall information, but to synthesize ideas in ways that have been boggling all of our imaginations. For thousands of years, philosophy has struggled with the question, can machines think? And increasingly, we're being challenged over that very question. Moreover, the great futurist Ray Kurzweil has identified AI as the greatest disruptor in the educational system. We've all sort of experimented with the abilities of AI to, in seconds, produce a quite thoughtful, perhaps, reflection in which it synthesizes ideas in a very complicated way. In spite of that, there's something that AI cannot do. And miraculously, Socrates, 2,500 years ago, seems to have identified that. How in the world could Socrates, living in ancient Athens 2,500 years ago, have recognized what the machine can't do? That's what challenges us to study ancient philosophy today. There's something very curious about Socrates, who's arguably the greatest philosopher in the history of philosophy. And yet, Socrates made a very conscious decision not to write his ideas down. How then can we identify Socrates as the greatest philosopher in the entire philosophical tradition when he leaves us with not a single word that is preserving his ideas? Well, in fact, writing was a great technological innovation of his own day. Writing was newly invented and introduced into ancient Greece, and writing itself, like the technological innovations of our own day, presented all sorts of great ways and great revolutionary ways to preserve ideas that our memories couldn't, to capture ideas of thinkers and allow them to live on long after their day. But writing also came with certain shortcomings. One thing is, since we could then have ideas preserved in a book, it no longer challenged us to use our minds to remember things in the way that oral cultures did in the ancient world. The second problem with writing that Socrates recognized was that writing says the same thing in the same way to anyone who reads the book. And there's a problem with that, particularly if we think how the physician examines the patient. And in fact, it's this very metaphor that Socrates appeals to in terms of what he's doing. He sees that just as the physician was examining the body of the patient, Socrates spoke to people in the marketplace to examine not their bodies, but their minds, their psyches, their souls, their psychological comportment. And in these conversations, one-on-one with the people he would meet in the marketplace, he was able to talk to them in specific ways to provoke them to see and analyze the patient. And Socrates is very famous for providing more questions than answers. That's very disturbing. Again, why would we recognize Socrates as such a great thinker when he provides more questions than answers? We see this depicted in Plato's account of Socrates, where he disturbingly has question after question when we want answers. Again, that's the great appeal of AI. We can go to AI and ask questions and get answers. And we could use AI to get answers, perhaps, but very uninspired answers. In a way, we might compare the kind of answers we would get using AI to the challenge that the addict has in trying to change their life around. There's a whole strategy and method in a book that people appeal to, the 12-step method. And you can read the book, but there's a very famous saying in 12-step programs that the system only works if you work it. And the same is true of Socratic and Platonic philosophy. You can read a summary of Socratic philosophy, but it won't do anything for you in the way that it will if you actually become a participant in the conversation with Socrates. How could we do that? Again, Socrates refused to write. And so we don't have the great ability to talk with him one-on-one. And yet, Plato, one of his students, preserves in these dialogues conversations with Socrates. And again, we could ask AI to summarize these conversations, but they don't really help us because a lot of these conversations operate with Socrates looking for a definition, for an ethical concept. What is justice? What is courage? What is virtue? And they investigate various definitions, and the dialogue concludes with aporia, with Socrates concluding, I know that I don't know. All of these answers that we've tried, that we've explored, that we've investigated have all failed. And so seemingly, again, if we read the Cliff Notes, if we read the summary, if we read the AI gloss on any of these works, they're very uninspiring. They'll tell us that they tried a whole bunch of conceptions, they've all failed, and the whole thing was a wild goose chase. And yet, the system works if we work it. There's something absolutely life-transforming when we engage with these dialogues one-on-one, and we become a conversation partner with Socrates in these dialogues. Plato preserves for us, in a way, using Socrates as a character, and creates these dramas that allow us to slip in and talk to Socrates so that we're not just reading about other ancient characters, but we have to self-reflect in the way that we would if we were going to the counselor, to the psychologist, and the counselor, rather than giving us answers to our problems, asks us question after question after question. How does it make you feel? And the system only works when we work it. If we're willing to put in the time and the effort and the mental energy, Socrates promises us that the search after answers, even though they seemingly, these investigations end without an answer, Socrates says that the search in itself will make us better, braver, and more virtuous by engaging in the search. So there's something absolutely life-transforming that he promises us. And he reveals this in a very complicated allegory.
Imagine prisoners that have spent their entire lives chained deep inside a cave. They have been chained so that they cannot see behind themselves, and they are forced to stare endlessly at the cave wall in front of them. Behind them, a fire is burning, and between the prisoners and the fire is a raised walkway. Now imagine that each day, a menagerie of objects crosses the walkway. Animals, and people carrying their wares to market. Their shapes create an intricate shadow play on the wall in front of the prisoners. This is the only world that the prisoners have ever known.
He tells us that the human condition is one of being enslaved underground in a world of prisoners who are trapped in a cave. What's keeping them in the cave? There are no prison guards. What's then keeping them in the cave? He tells us that they're chained. And he tells us the significance of the chains is that their love of simple pleasures like food and drink and sex and all the things that make us feel good. Socrates very keenly gives us an early sense of addiction, something that we are coming more and more to understand in the 21st century, and that the first step to escaping out of our state of enslavement is to overcome our addictions. But then what is occluding our ability to escape is our mental enslavement by way of a puppet show. What is the puppet show? The puppet show is mediating our ability to see the world for what it is. And more than any time in history, in the 21st century, we're living in a world mediated by the media. The world of the influencers that are shaping and influencing everything we see and influencing all of our perceptions of the world, create a world for us of illusion and delusion and confusion. So first we have to overcome our addictions to various pleasures, and then we have to escape this world of mental enslavement by way of social media, and I think we can all relate to that. And then it's a hard and arduous task, he says, to climb out of the cave of enslavement into a world of liberation. And what is this liberation? It's an intellectual escape to a world of absolutes, to a world of absolute justice and virtue and goodness. And the ultimate image that Socrates says illumines all the things in this upper realm is the good. And he gives us a metaphor that is represented by the sun, something that we can't look directly at, but allows us to see with our mind's eye a world of truth and knowledge, and that the world of this absolute world of ideas can set us free. So why study ancient philosophy in the 21st century? We need ancient philosophy more than ever to allow us to escape our bonds of mental slavery and enter a world of truth and freedom.
It works if you work it. Works if you work it. Oh, if you work it.